A technique that you see sometimes in design work is where the designer exaggerates the effect that happens during printing. So they'll exploit or exaggerate color halftones. So before I show you how to do that, let me just make sure you understand what it is that you're copying here. If you were to take a good magnifying glass and get up really close to something that's in a magazine or basically anything that's printed with color halftones, once you get up close enough, you'll see that colors other than CMYK, pure CMYK, are made up of little dots that overlap. So a misconception is to think that those colors actually physically mix together during the printing process, but actually our eye mixes them, but you can't really tell that until you get up close. So if I zoom in on this, and I'm just mimicking what happens here. So at a distance you can't really tell, but as that microphone gets closer to the printed work, this is what you'd start to see, that this work is made up of these overlapping CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, black colors to give the optical illusion of alternate colors. So I will undo this so that I can then show you how to mimic this effect. So right now what you're looking at is a TIFF image that was created in Illustrator, and I use the exporting techniques that are covered under Illustrator videos. So here's how you mimic that effect. You go to Filter, Pixelate, Color Halftone. And unfortunately, even in CS5, there is no preview option on this, so you just need to experiment. So the max radius is just what you think it is, the biggest dot that would be made. Smaller this is, the harder it is for you to even tell that the process is happening. But so if you want that exaggerated look, maybe this is a good starting point, 8 pixels. And then this, and I'll show you an example of what this means, but the screen angle has to do with the 4 channels, the CMYK. If you think of those as being on like a separate sheet almost, you alternate the rows of angles at the rows of halftone dots at different angles, so you do not get what's known as a moire pattern. Now this is for print when you're trying not to make it look like this, but you can do anything you want if you're just trying to mimic the effect. So let's click OK and see what this looks like. Takes a little while to churn out. But there you go. That's anywhere from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 different colors blending together to create these colors. So here it is on more of a red tone, and here it is on this logo that's made up of green and blues. Now I'll go back in and I'll change that to a bigger diameter. So here I made the diameter twice the size it was before, and you can see at a certain point it starts to become illegible for type and unrecognizable in the shapes. So that's basically it. You just go in, you experiment with those different options. But let me show you a couple of other things. We'll start with the photograph, see how that works, and then I'll go in and I'll explain a little bit more about the actual printing techniques, and then I'll show you a little kind of gimmicky way to make a border around an image out of these halftones. So the best example of the magic of halftone printing is an image. And even an image is just made out of those 4 colors, and probably 90% of the cases of the printed work that you see or that you'll produce. So if we do that same technique to this image, there's just one thing to keep in mind, is that most snapshots like this right from a digital camera are going to be RGB images. You can still do the halftones with RGB, but it just doesn't really make nearly as much sense, right? Because you're trying to mimic the printing process. So first thing I would most likely do would be to go under mode and change it from RGB to CMYK. And then if we do the same process as before, you'll see that this image, we can get it to fake the printing results and exaggerate the dots. Okay, so there you go. And then, you know, obviously if you back up far enough, you can't even see the dots, but when you get in closer, you see them. Now I mentioned earlier about the angle of the dots. Now let's see if you can see that. What I'll do is I'll isolate the channels. Okay, so if you open up the channels palette and you isolate, like normally you're going to see it just like this right here with all the channels on, and then you can click channels off to see what it looks like with just a couple on. And for whatever reason, when only one is on, it just shows that data in pure black, but it's good enough to get the idea across. So let's look at just the yellow channel. So if we zoom in here, you start to see that these dots form an alignment. Well, actually, this one, it's not so easy to tell unless this channel, it might just be straight up and down. In fact, we can double check that in a second. Yeah, okay, so now you see in the magenta channel, they're at this kind of angle. If you're following my mouse, the way that they line up. And let's check the cyan channel. Yeah, as you can see that there's an angle there. So if let's take this cyan channel and let's go back in and we'll change this when we do it this time. Okay, so I changed the image back to normal. We'll go back in, filter, pixelate, color halftone, and there's our angles. And so, yeah, that was right. Channel 3 was yellow, perfect 90-degree angle, and these other ones were at a slight angle. So if I go into channel 1, which should line up to the cyan, and I change that from 80 to 90, now what you should see is that when we go into the data for that channel, it's going to be straight up and down. And what happens when you do that, it starts to make your image look even goofier. You know, so if you're after this optical illusion, play around with those things. Yep, so there you go. There's a cyan channel perfectly 90 degree. So the practical application for this is if you go to press and you're having that problem, but usually you as the designer really aren't going to have to worry about that. Now there's a concept here that I think that is very important for you to understand as a designer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take these color swatches, we'll focus on these color swatches, and I'll take this whole image and we'll turn it into color halftones. Now this is pure cyan, this is pure magenta, pure yellow, pure black, and this is a red that actually is made of a CMYK that actually uses a little bit of all of these, and this is made out of, I believe, just pure mixture of magenta and cyan. So what I want you to do is think in your head, what's going to happen to these? How are they going to look when we do this process? Now, it's going to get a little bit goofy around the edges, but I want you to concentrate on like what's going to happen to the center of these, and hopefully you already know the answer. So let's do this. Filter. Halftone. Let's make it just a little bit on the big side. Click OK. Come on, baby. There we go. All right. So hopefully that's what you were expecting to happen. If not, think about it this way. This was that purplish color, which is made up of cyan and magenta. Now, obviously, when you get really close, it loses that effect. This one was made up of all 4 colors. So hopefully that answers the question as to why these are solid inside. That's exactly what would happen at press. You don't need halftone dots for yellow to make yellow. The only situation where you would use halftone dots with a pure color is if you're trying to make it look lighter. So if you're trying to make a super pale yellow, then yeah, you're going to have some dots here. And if it's like a little bit orangish, it's probably going to be sparse yellow dots with even more sparing use of magenta dots. All right, now let me show you the last little trick here is to make a border out of these halftone dots. So for this, we'll go back to this image here. And now obviously if you were doing this professionally or whatever, or for a project, you'd take a little bit more time on this and probably bring out the rulers, drag some guides, but I'm just going to do this quickly. So what you want to do is define your frame. You do it like this, where you select everything but the frame, and I just use the regular old marquee tool, and then what you do is you go to select inverse, and so now you have this actual area selected, the outer area rather than the inside of the image. Then you shortcut Q, the Q key, put you into quick mask mode, and then all you have to do is repeat our above steps. And yeah, I'll go 10 here. Click OK, and probably should put this back to the original angle. Okay, so now you have this in the mask, and then all we have to do is hit Q again to get out of quick mask mode, and then I simply hit delete. Oh, you know what? I'm going to have to make a background image on there. Hold on one second. Well, I may as well show you what I have to do here, just in case you run into the same issue. Whenever you're trying to delete something from an image and it just has a background, you need to release that background. So quickest way to do that is just double click on here. You can give it a name if you want, or just hit enter. Now it will let me delete from here. So I hit delete, and it deletes that outer area. And then if I want to see what's going on here, I would just put in another layer, fill that with a color. So I'll just fill it with the foreground color here by holding down Option and Delete. And actually a better way to do that even would be to get rid of my selection that I have by going Apple D and then truly filling this whole layer in. So just in case we need to change that later. So now I'm going to go Option Delete and then just drag this layer underneath this one. And so that's what we have. That color doesn't show up very good, so let's try it with white. Okay, so now I select this and I go Command Delete to fill it with white. So that's it.